Sports. I'm your host, Kalani Lua. So let's talk about some things. In the UFC right now, we have one of the biggest questions and dilemmas to deal with. What's next for Daniel Cormier? DC just came off of the most historic win of his career and knocking out Stipe Miocic to earn the UFC Heavyweight Championship at UFC 226. He's now the fifth member to hold two titles in two different divisions. He's also the second member to hold two titles in two different divisions simultaneously. But now, what's next for DC? Cormier has stated that he would like to defend both titles, but he's also made it clear that come March of next year, his 40th birthday, he's retiring. Finito. That is it. So, with a hard deadline that he seems well content on keeping, who is he to fight till then? The big news came after the fight when Brock Lesnar jumped in the cage and the seeds were set for those two to meet each other. If you remember earlier this year at the UFC press conference, when they do about two a year where they announce the future event, Dana White did confirm that there is a possibility that Brock Lesnar will face the winner of Stipe and DC, and DC's face lit up like a Christmas tree. So you had that. You had the little run-in inside the cage. Okay, so Brock Lesnar's there. But Brock Lesnar's 5-3-1, hasn't fought in 2 years. Technically, he's 0-2-1 in his last three outings. Is one no contest was the overturned victory that he had over Mark Hunt in UFC 200 in 2016 due to a failed drug test. Before that, he lost to Cain Velasquez and Alistair Overeem. Brock hasn't won technically on record in the UFC since he defeated Shane Carwin back in 2010. 8 years. But it's still Brock Lesnar, one of the biggest names in the sport. So that's going to be a major draw. But he won't be available to fight until at least January. So he may be Daniel Cormier's final fight in the UFC. Possibly. We'll see. But what are some other options? Well, what about the man he just knocked out, Stipe Miocic? Stipe did make a record of defending the UFC Heavyweight Championship 3 straight times, something nobody else has ever done. Granted, it was a first-round knockout, and that's really going to go against Stipe Miocic because even though he's dominated the heavyweight division and he does hold the record for most title defenses, track record shows not many champions who get finished in the first round get an immediate rematch. I mean, Ronda Rousey got one. Granted, it was against Amanda Nunes, not Holly Holm, but she at least made it to the second round. Jose Aldo got one against Max Holloway, but again, he made it to the third round. Georges St. Pierre, you could kind of say got one, but not really, because after he lost to Matt Serra, he had to go and beat Josh Koscheck, Matt Hughes, then Matt Serra. That's because Matt Serra got injured. So if you look at it, most champions, or pretty much every champion who's been knocked out or submitted in the first round, does not get an immediate rematch. Look at Chuck the Iceman Liddell. When he lost his light heavyweight championship to Quinn Rampage Jackson, he didn't get an immediate rematch, and we know how much Liddell was Dana White's favorite fighter. So if that doesn't happen, we could best believe Stipe probably isn't going to be in the mix. But he does have some things favoring him. One, he is available to fight right now. Brock won't be available till January. Another opponent that I'm going to bring up just shortly, he's not available just yet. We'll find out his fate at the end of this month. So in the heavyweight division, who else is really there? He's not going to fight his teammate Cain Velasquez. He said that, no offense, but Curtis Blades and Derek Lewis aren't necessarily the big names he's looking for. And because Francis Ngannou put a hell of a stinker of a fight against Derek Lewis, granted, he did lose, so that also eliminated him, but it was also such a bad fight that even if he won, that probably wouldn't have been such a big fight. So in the heavyweight division, Stipe does seem like the lone wolf as far as options there. But if DC wants to move back down to 205, where he has said, I will gladly defend his title, who should he face there? Okay, well, you got Alexander Gustafsson, who's the number one contender in the light heavyweight division. He's going to be taking on Volkan Ozdemir next month at UFC 227. Now, DC has defeated Gustafsson before back in 2015. It's a very good fight. These two went the distance. Alex almost knocked out DC with a knee in the third round. Cormier was able to regroup himself, come back, and get the decision victory. But he said, Gus has really got to do something special and fantastic again at 227 for me to consider him, considering I've beat him. And really, he's not that big of a draw. He just isn't. He was on the cover of UFC, a video game a couple years ago, but just isn't that big of a draw. So, okay, he's got to get past Volkan Ozdemir. That will be his third win in a row. Gus has fought DC before. It did go to a decision. So he's got that, but okay, we'll see. DC also kind of surprised people when he said, what about Shogun Rua? Shogun Rua is scheduled to fight this weekend at UFC Fight Night against Anthony Smith in the main event. If Shogun wins, that'll be 4 fights. That'll be 4 victories in a row in the UFC. Shogun is a former UFC light heavyweight champion and a former Pride Grand Prix champion. And for those of you who aren't familiar, winning the Grand Prix in Pride back in today, that was a huge deal. So there is something to be said there. Shogun is a big name, has a huge fan following, former champion. He just had one of his fights against Dan Henderson inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. He's a future UFC Hall of Famer himself, and it's somebody DC has never faced before. So there is that, okay, maybe not the most exciting one when it's first brought up. When you think about it, there is some intrigue there. Here's a very interesting matchup, though, and one that I think a lot of fans would be in favor of seeing more so than the majority of the matchups I've already mentioned. Yoel Romero versus DC. Yoel Romero, who does compete in the middleweight division, has been kind of said that he's going to move up to light heavyweight due to bad weight cuts to make 185. So if he moves up to light heavyweight, he's already set the challenge out to DC to say, hey, let's do it. Let's fight New York City in November. Let's go ahead. Problem with that is, and DC brought this up, Yoel Romero did lose his last outing against Robert Whittaker earlier this year at UFC 225. He did miss weight for that cut. And then last year when he fought Robert Whittaker, he lost the fight then against Whittaker. So technically, he's had 2 title fights, and he's lost both of them to Robert Whittaker. Granted, you can make the argument that Romero might have won both fights. They were both very close, very competitive. So it's not like he got blown out the water. But Yoel Romero earlier this year did knock out DC's training partner, Luke Rockhold. Rockhold wasn't training with DC for the fight, but they are former training partners at AKA. Luke got in the cage when DC beat Miocic to celebrate, so they still are close. But if Yoel Romero, a former silver medalist in the Olympic wrestling games, if he was to join the light heavyweight division and take on DC, he hasn't fought at 205 yet. He did lose his last outing. He's 1-2 in his last couple matchups, but still, big name, terrific story, and it'll be a tremendous matchup. DC even said, hey, we never wrestled back in our wrestling days. He probably would have beat me. He's one of the greatest wrestlers to ever live. But I don't know if I want to face him just yet. I don't know if he's the right guy for me, but if you kind of think about it, it would make a lot of sense. Yoel Romero, who missed weight at 185, surely shouldn't miss weight at 205. We said about Anthony Rumble Johnson when he fought at 170, moving up to middleweight at 185, should have missed weight. He did, but he made weight at 205 easily. Yoel Romero should make 205 easy, and if he doesn't have to drain himself so much to get down to 185, how would he look in a new division against Daniel Cormier as well? That could be a very good matchup. 2 former Olympic level wrestlers meeting inside the octagon. Both are, DC is 39, Romero's 41. I mean, can it really write itself any better than that? And then obviously there is the elephant in the room, the gold goose, so to speak. His foe, his rival. Although I don't know if you could call it a rivalry when you're 0-2 or 0-1-1, but still in all, his biggest challenge would be a matchup against John Bones Jones. Now, John Jones' fate will be decided at the end of this month. He did fail his test from last year for in-competition drug test. And just to be clear, when John Jones failed this test after he defeated Daniel Cormier for the light heavyweight championship and he popped out for a steroid, you got to also remember, he passed the first test, failed the second one, and then passed the third one. And the one that he failed had a very small amount of traces in his system. So there is a possibility that it was a tainted supplement, and that's not nothing new. Yoel Romero got busted for a tainted supplement, and we've seen other fighters as well who have been busted and then come to find out it was just a tainted supplement. So there is that. But John Jones, we could get into a whole nother video as far as his issues and everything. But if he is reinstated and does not have to serve a suspension and he gets credited for time already served, he could be available for November. New York City. Daniel Cormier taking on New York's own John Jones at heavyweight, the trilogy. And it would be fitting for Daniel Cormier if his last couple of fights in the UFC could be against his biggest challenge in John Jones and then a big money fight against Brock Lesnar. Problem with that is if he fights John Jones at heavyweight, what if he loses? Now the fight with Brock Lesnar is off, and that's John Jones taking on Brock Lesnar. So really, him taking a fight at heavyweight may not make the most sense. He may want to wait to cash in against Brock next year, and hey, that makes all the sense in the world. But in doing so, now you got to look at your options at 205. I named him Alexander Gustafsson. If he's able to win in spectacular fashion against Volkan Ozdemir, okay. Shogun Rua, if he picks up another victory, especially by knockout or submission or just a very dominant performance, okay. Or Yoel Romero, who I'm voting for Yoel Romero. I don't know what you guys think, but I would love to see those two go at it. But what do you guys think? Let me know. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And let me know what you think in the comment section. Go ahead, give me your picks on who you would like to see Daniel Cormier fight, whether at heavyweight or light heavyweight. And is there somebody out there I didn't name? Maybe. We shall see. Thank you guys for tuning in once again. This is another episode of All Things Sports. I'm Kalani Lua. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at KLua11. That's KLUA11. And the sports page, All Things Sports on Facebook. That's All Things Sports on Facebook. Till next time, peace.